Romany and Raq by G Bramwell Evens. Give me the clear blue sky over my head and the green turf beneath my feet, a winding road before me, and then to thinking. Chapter 6. The Spectre of the Night. September. John, Rob and I were having our last day's fishing of the season. Not that we were expecting to get a big basket, for the rivers were still without much fresh water. But there is joy in the music of the stream, and the trees, rich in browns, scarlets and purples, give the sense of quiet gladness. I had a feeling that my rod knew that it would soon be stowed away, and its foreknowledge of impending inactivity took away something of its whippiness. As we wandered our way in the morning light down to the river, we passed a brook which ordinarily ripples in joyous song to join the river. Now it was but a tiny trickle, and must have been afraid that even a bird would drink it dry. Along its banks stood old trees, their trunks sawn off about 12 feet from the ground. Above these, graceful long shoots sway in the autumn breeze. "Pollard willows," said John, as I stopped to look in one whose trunk was hollow. "Any old owl or bats have a sleep in there?" I shook my head. "Nothing but a lot of what looks like moist brown peat dust clinging to the inside." Not very far from our first stream, John sat down to put on his waders. "There was a rare talk some years ago," said he, "of a ghost owl that was to be seen flitting about these fields at night. Some of the farmers told me they had seen something flying about, and it glowed like a fire. You should have heard some of the descriptions of it that I got from the cottagers. Eyes glowing like storm lamps and wings of fire. It looked like Satan let loose." John had a quiet chuckle as he recalled the gossip which had been readily regaled to him and had lost nothing in the telling. "Of course," he continued, "I thought some of 'em had seen it when they were coming home late from the inn. Men do see queer things, I'm told, on such occasions. But the women folk were positive, and told how it had brushed against them in the dark and scared them to death. Go over and have another look at that hollow trunk." Again I almost squeezed myself inside the old willow, but I could find no clue that would have warranted me in even making a guess as to the cause of the ghost owl. By this time we were both ready for the river, and as we walked on, John continued, "I was coming home one night in July. I had been trying to get hold of a sea trout, and it was getting on for midnight. Suddenly I heard the hoo-hoo of an owl. It quavered off into the silence of the night, and the next minute I saw a shining thing come like a spectre over the willows. I must say that for a moment it gave me a queer feeling here," and John pointed somewhere in the region of his third waistcoat button. "The ghost owl?" I murmured. "It was a reality then, right enough?" John nodded. "It came so sudden like that I involuntarily ducked, and as I did so my eye caught something glowing in that old willow. What do you think I found when I went and examined it?" "Glowworms," I said, hazarding a guess. He shook his head. "A blue light shimmering on that moist peaty dust you found in there. It was all aglow with some kind of phosphorescence." "Something like the shimmer one sees on fish as it lies in the larder?" I asked. "Just like that," John answered. "You see it sometimes on a fine summer night by the sea. Every wave as it trips onto the shore is rimmed with shining blue. Myriads of little infusorii lit up like fairy lamps are the cause of it." For the moment my mind wandered to those beautiful shores by which I have sat and watched those fairy waves. I could see the dark stretch of many waters before me, with the sea so calm that the stars used it as a mirror. Then would come the quiet swish of the wavelet as it broke upon the beach, and at the edge of the turmoil the fringe of blue fire. I was recalled from my reverie by hearing John say, "And then I knew the secret of the ghost owl." I looked at him, not being able for the moment to link up the old willow tree with the appearance of the bogey of the night, so my friend continued, I should think that brown dust must have been alive with little glowing things, such as you've seen in the waves, and the old owl must have used the willow as his roosting place, And he got so well dusted with the light powder, I broke in, that when he issued forth in the night, he looked like an illuminated Christmas card. That's the secret of the ghost owl right enough, said John, giving his rod a preparatory flick or two. As we entered the water, I looked at my watch. It was 10:30, and Raq, as he saw the stream in front of me, took up his usual position on the bank, awaiting with interest my need of the landing net if good luck attended my efforts. The opposite bank was lined with hazel bushes, and I could see the full nuts bearing down the slender branches. A rustle in the leaves attracted my attention, and for a moment I saw the dainty dancing figure of a dormouse. He had been visiting his larder, and was making the most of it ere the lean times begin, when he tucked his tail carefully over his sensitive nose, sleeping to the lullaby of the strong winds. On the bank a few rabbits dozed in the autumn sunshine. Raq saw them too, and looked at me with pleading in his eyes, pleading that he might be allowed to swim the river and scatter the drowsy family. This, however, would have spoiled my chances of getting a trout, and I shook my head at him. How saucy rabbits are when they know a stream lies between them and a probable enemy. Hardly one moved as I advanced into the water, but I knew they were keeping a close scrutiny on my every movement. For a moment or two I drank in the scene before me. In some of the fields boys and girls were out with baskets, brambling. I could hear their laughter above the lilt of the waters. Far away toward the fells I could see the tiny white spots of sheep browsing on the heights. It will not be long now ere the shepherds will bring their charges towards the lowlands for the winter. When the sheep turn their heads towards the glades, then the trout begin to turn their heads upwards towards the little becks which have their rise in the hills, and conversely, when the sheep once more move towards the heights in spring, the winter storms being a thing of the past, then the angler knows that the trout are once more down in the river, and his joys begin. I was turning these things over in my mind when my line tightened, but I struck too late, and the fish got away. It was the only chance that I had that morning, and it caught me daydreaming. It is always the unexpected that happens. When John joined me later, he had 3 fish to his credit. Not bad fishing, considering that it was late September and that the river was as clear as crystal. But then John is an angler, and compared with him, I am only a fisherman. What flies did you use? I asked, as we sat down enjoying a quiet smoke. He held up to me some of his own favourites. He had no standard pattern, but all his lures were of the shadow type. What are their names? I asked. He shook his head. I can't say. I'm no great believer in certain colours or certain shapes. When a trout wants his breakfast, I don't think he stops to look at complexions or count whether an insect has 6 or 16 legs. What I aim at is natural shape and size as near as I can make 'em, but keeping 'em on the soft, gauzy side. On the ghost owl plan, shadowy and spectral, I said with a smile. Somewhat like that, John answered, and though little luck was to be expected, down he went to the river again, with a hope that springs eternal in the angler's breast. Later on, when dusk deepened into darkness, we met again, and for the sheer joy of the thing kindled a fire and imbibed the smell of smoking pine wood. Nearly all wild things had gone to sleep. The sounds which still caught our ears were muffled. The hunters of the night were wide awake. And what's the catch? I asked. A couple more, John said, though this sea trout hadn't seen the sea for many a day. In the glow of the fire I could see that the silvery shine of the fresh run trout was absent. The scales were almost bronze, and the dark sheen of the back had lost its polish. If that fish were to stay in the river for a few more months, It returned to the natural colour of the brown trout from which it sprung, said he. How easily anything slips back to its natural state, he added musingly. Then, after a moment, he sighed. I lost a big one in the strong water over there. How big do you think it was? I asked, lifting a warning finger. Careful now. John laughed. I should think it would be over 2 pound. Oh, moderate man, said I. I believe you are reforming. As we trudged homewards, I said, Did you ever hear the story of the weighing of the baby? John shook his head. A new baby had come to a very remote cottage. It was the first, and the proud parents were anxious to know its weight, but had no means of gratifying their wish. They had no neighbours near, but by good luck they remembered that a couple of anglers were in the neighbourhood, and someone in the house volunteered to find them and to borrow their anglers' scales. When at last they arrived, the family gathered round with great expectations to see the weighing-in ceremony. The pointer of the spring balance stopped at 25 pounds. John stopped for a moment to light his pipe, and I could see his eyes twinkling in the flickering light. A well-nourished child, was all he said.